My wife is a careless. My detective found out and recorded video evidence that she doesn't care about our marriage, but when we were getting divorced, she almost committed. I deeply regret, Mr. Walker, having to share such difficult news, John Michaels said, handing me an envelope. Inside, I found a comprehensive report detailing what my wife had been doing with her former boss, Grant Jacobs. The package also included a collection of photos and a DVD. I glanced at the photos but had yet to watch the DVD. A part of me hesitated, though I knew facing the truth was necessary. Any idea how long this has been going on? I asked. John referred to his original report. Based on the evidence, it's been at least 10 years, John said, possibly even 12. It seems to have started around the time your wife was up for that major promotion, which was about a year after your daughter Sophie was born. The thought struck me hard. I might have to get DNA tests to confirm if my children were truly mine. Then another concern arose, the risk of sexually transmitted diseases. The investigation revealed Grant had been with multiple married women, including Linda. Considering Linda and I had still been intimate after she left her job, I wondered what risks she had exposed me to. I glanced at the report again, scoffing at the note from John's investigator, who observed that Linda seemed oblivious to Grant's affairs when he wasn't with her. For what it's worth, Mr. Walker, Grant mentioned he never wanted to break up your marriage, John continued, and they never met up in your home. At least my house remained untarnished by Grant's presence, I thought. Thanks for telling me, John, I said. I had met Grant Jacobs a few times and always found him unbearable. He was handsome, sure, but there was an arrogance about him that always rubbed me the wrong way. More than once, I had to resist the urge to knock that smug grin off his face. Now, I knew why he always looked so self-assured. There's more, Mr. Walker, John continued. Grant's sister, Natalie, has known about the affair since the beginning. It seems she may have even facilitated it. That stung. I had always thought Natalie was decent, nothing like her brother. It was heartbreaking to realize she was involved in betraying me too. Have you spoken to a lawyer yet? John asked. Not yet, I admitted. I wanted to have all the facts before I took any steps. Well, I do quite a bit of work with Lisa Hawkins. She's top tier when it comes to handling cases like this. If you're interested, I can send this over to her office and give her a heads up that you'll be contacting her. That would be great, I replied. Thanks, John. I'll reach out to her soon. John handed me his business card, and I slipped it into my pocket. Mind if I give you some advice? He asked. Go ahead. Let Lisa handle this, John said firmly. I know you're hurting, and you probably want to lash out, but it's not worth it. This isn't just some online story. It's real life, and you've got 2 kids to think about. He was right. As much as I wanted to explode, to confront Linda and scream at her for all the years of deception, I couldn't lose sight of what really mattered, Sophie and Aaron. Thanks, I nodded, standing to leave. I'll keep that in mind. I settled the bill and left John's office, my head swirling with emotions. My entire marriage now felt like a lie. Despite knowing John was right, the pain was almost unbearable. I sat in my car and cried, feeling my heart break for about 15 minutes before I pulled myself together. Once I composed myself, I fished out the business card John had given me and dialed the law offices of Lisa Hawkins to schedule an appointment for the next day. Lisa's assistant provided me with a list of documents to bring to the meeting, including financial records. On the way home, I stopped by a convenience store and bought a pack of cigarettes, a habit I hadn't indulged in since my college days. Afterward, I drove to a nearby bar, hoping a drink might numb the pain, even if just for a while. I wasn't much of a drinker, but today felt like an exception. As I sat at the bar nursing a beer, I lit a cigarette and took a long drag. You okay, buddy? The bartender asked as he noticed my forlorn expression. Can you tell? I replied with a bitter chuckle. Unfortunately, yeah, he said with a sympathetic grin. Let me guess, just found out your wife's been unfaithful? Spot on, I nodded. For 12 years. Can you believe it? Believe it or not, I can, he replied. Seen and heard it all working behind this bar. No doubt, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. The bartender chuckled softly. Mind if I share something my grandpa used to say? Go ahead. My grandpa used to say, I felt bad because I had no shoes. Then I met a man with no feet. He paused for a moment, letting that sink in before continuing. I know you're hurting now. I've been there myself. But it does get better, and trust me, there are folks out there who've had it way worse. Your grandpa sounds like a wise man, I remarked. He sure was, the bartender affirmed. Finish your beer, then head on home. Handle your business, do what needs to be done. You won't find any answers at the bottom of that glass. I nodded in agreement, knowing deep down he was right. I took a sip of my beer, reflecting on his words. Never in a million years would I have imagined that Linda could betray me like this. Looking back, there were subtle signs, but none of them, on their own, felt significant enough to confront her about. But now, everything made sense. After our second child, Sophie, was born, I got a vasectomy. Oddly enough, Linda went back on birth control. I remember asking her why she needed it, considering I'd taken care of things. She gave me some explanation about wanting to be extra cautious and how the pills helped regulate her period. Not being an expert, I took her word for it. Then there were the business trips. When she landed her big promotion and started traveling with Grant, I noticed her wardrobe began to change. Her clothes became less businesslike, more glamorous. She'd brush it off, saying she needed to entertain clients. But now, I realized who she was really entertaining. I would call her in the evenings during her trips, and she was always in her room. But there were times when I thought I heard a man's voice in the background. I also noticed her voice would crack at times, almost as if she was distracted. If Grant was touching her while she was on the phone with me, it would make sense. And then, there was the aftershave. Occasionally, I'd catch a faint scent of Grant's aftershave on Linda's clothes when she returned home from her trips. I recognized it because every time I met Grant, he was wearing that same damn cologne. It made me sick to think about how close they must have been for his scent to linger on her like that. Her so-called retirement was just another red flag. After stepping down from her full-time role, she started working one afternoon a week, but even that soon became 2 or 3 days a week. Her Friday afternoons stretched into entire weekends, supposedly for business. But now I knew better. It was all a sham. I finally finished my beer and stubbed out my cigarette. The bartender gave me a nod as I left, and I returned the gesture, grateful for his advice. When I got home, I noticed Linda's car in the garage, which surprised me. I thought she would be working late. I closed the garage door and walked inside, taking off my jacket and heading for my home office. Linda caught me on the way in, her face immediately registering concern as she noticed the smell of cigarettes and beer. "You've been smoking," she said, her brows furrowing. "And I smell beer. Is everything okay, John?" "No," I replied, the weight of the day's revelations sinking in. "To be honest, today has been one of the worst days of my life." "What happened? Did something bad happen at work?" "Something like that," I muttered, sidestepping her question. "I'm going to spend the evening in my office. I'm not great company right now. Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked, her voice full of false sincerity. I thought to myself, undo everything you've done, but I simply said, "No, nothing you can do." "Oh, by the way, John, I'll be gone this weekend, starting Friday," she mentioned casually. I paused, narrowing my eyes. "Again? Didn't you just go on a trip recently?" "Yes, but something important came up," she explained. "It's just business, you know." "I see," I replied, the sarcasm dripping from my voice. "What about Sophie's birthday party? It's this Saturday." "I know," she sighed, "but I can't avoid this. Could you explain to her why I won't be there? I'm sure she'll understand." "I'm not covering for you anymore," I told her firmly, feeling the anger boil up inside me. "You missed Erin's birthday and our anniversary last year. You explained to Sophie why you'd rather be on another trip with Grant than at her birthday party." Linda wasn't pleased with my response. She let out an exasperated sigh before trying to justify herself. "John, please. You're being unreasonable." "No, Linda," I shot back. "You supposedly retired months ago after the company was sold, but you've been away more than ever. I'm starting to wonder if there's something you haven't told me. Is there?" "What are you implying?" she snapped defensively. "Are you accusing me of something? How would you feel if the roles were reversed?" I countered, my tone sharp. She hesitated, then softened slightly. I see your point, she conceded. But trust me, it's just business. That's what you keep saying, I muttered, feeling disgusted. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got work to do. Please don't disturb me tonight. You'll need to take care of the kids. I retreated into my home office, closing and locking the door behind me. I heard Linda try to open it, but when she realized it was locked, she knocked softly. John, she called out, her voice muffled by the door. Please talk to me. Leave me alone, Linda, I said through gritted teeth. I'm busy. I heard her walk away, and I immediately went to gather the documents Lisa had asked me to bring to our meeting. After organizing everything, I turned to the evidence John had provided. I sat at my desk, staring at the DVD, feeling a mix of dread and anger. Part of me wanted to smash it into pieces, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. With a deep breath, I put on my headphones and started the video. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to see. When you're in my position, seeing someone you love give themselves to another person willingly, it rips you apart. I didn't care how John had gotten this footage. All I knew was that the love I once had for Linda was gone, erased in an instant. As I watched her with Grant on the screen, the anger inside me boiled over. They were laughing, touching, and making love as if they hadn't a care in the world. I listened to their conversation as they lay tangled in each other's arms. Are we still meeting up this weekend? Grant asked, holding her close. Of course, Linda replied, smiling up at him. You know I can't go too long without being with you. What about your daughter's birthday party? Isn't that this weekend? He inquired. Yes, but John will handle it, she said nonchalantly. He's better with the kids than I am. Besides, if I had to choose between dealing with a bunch of bratty girls or being here with you, I'd rather be here. You know I love having you here, Grant said, stroking her hair. But I'm worried he might start getting suspicious. You're supposed to be retired, remember? I've told you, Grant. Retired or not, I'm not giving this up, she said, caressing his chest. I love my family and I love John. But what we've shared these past 12 years means everything to me. I'm glad to hear that, Grant responded, planting a kiss on her forehead. Remember when we first started this? You said you'd choose John and the kids if it ever came to that. Do you still feel that way? Linda hesitated before answering, I don't know. It hasn't come up yet. I don't know how you've kept him in the dark for so long, Grant mused. If he ever finds out, it won't be pretty. It wasn't easy at first, but I've learned how to keep my business life separate, she explained. I've never denied him anything, and I've always treated him well. If he finds out, I'll just threaten him in the divorce. It might not be that simple, Grant warned her. But if things go south, you can always stay here with me. I like having you around. Thanks, Grant, she said, smiling. But I don't think it'll come to that. He hasn't figured it out in 12 years, and I doubt he ever will. How long do you plan on keeping this up? He asked, laughing. As long as I can, she replied. Maybe for the rest of my life. I couldn't take it anymore. I closed the video and shoved the DVD back into the envelope. My hands were shaking with anger and hurt, and I swore to myself that I would never touch Linda again. A knock on the office door startled me. It was Linda. What? I barked. The kids are going to bed, she said softly through the door. Can you at least come out and say goodnight? Yeah, just a sec, I replied, trying to regain my composure. I shut down my computer and went upstairs. Sophie was already in bed, looking at me with her big brown eyes. Are you okay, Dad? She asked, sensing my distress. Yeah, I smiled weakly. I'm fine. Go to sleep now, sweetheart. I love you. I love you too, she said, kissing me on the cheek. I left her room and went downstairs to the kitchen. Linda had kept some food warm for me, but I wasn't hungry. Instead, I went out to the patio and lit another cigarette. A few minutes later, Linda joined me, sitting in the chair next to mine. John, what's going on? She asked, her voice filled with concern. You've been distant all day, and now you're smoking again. You quit back in college. Talk to me. Life doesn't always go the way we planned, does it? I retorted bitterly, taking a drag from my cigarette. What do you mean by that? She asked, puzzled. I exhaled a plume of smoke and shook my head. You wouldn't understand. John, please, she pleaded. I love you. You can talk to me about anything. I glanced at her through the haze of smoke, feeling nothing but contempt. It's too late for that, Linda. Too late for what? I don't understand, she pressed, clearly confused. You're so savvy in business, Linda, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Figure it out. John, I need some space, Linda. I cut her off. Just give me some time to sort things out. Linda stared at me for a moment, her eyes welling up with tears. All right, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry. She hurried inside, crying softly as she closed the door behind her. I finished my cigarette and sat in silence, staring up at the stars. I spent the rest of the night in my office, trying to focus on gathering the documents for Lisa. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that damned video playing in my head, over and over again. The sight of Linda with Grant, the way she smiled at him, the way she dismissed our family like it was a minor inconvenience. Those images haunted me. By the time morning came, I had barely slept. I showered, got dressed, and packed my things for work. I spent a little time with the kids before they left for school, but I couldn't bring myself to say goodbye to Linda. Don't I get a kiss goodbye anymore? She asked as I opened the front door. Sorry, I muttered, blowing her a half-hearted kiss. See you later. I love you, John, she said softly, but her words felt hollow to me. Yeah, same here, I mumbled, walking out the door without looking back. At work, it was impossible to focus. Every time I tried to immerse myself in a project, my thoughts drifted back to Linda and the hell she had put me through. My boss noticed I wasn't myself and pulled me aside. Everything okay, John? He asked with genuine concern. I'm going through some stuff at home, I admitted. I may need some time off soon. I'm sorry to hear that, he said sympathetically. Take whatever time you need. Just let me know. I nodded gratefully and tried to get back to work, but it was no use. My mind was elsewhere. Around noon, I left early for my appointment with Lisa Hawkins. When I arrived at her office, she greeted me with a warm smile. Good afternoon, Mr. Walker, she said as we shook hands. Please call me John, I replied. And you can call me Lisa, she smiled. I've reviewed the report Mr. Michaels sent over, and I'm so sorry you're going through this. It's never easy, especially when children are involved. How are you holding up? Not great, I admitted. I've been trying to keep it together, but it's been hard. I understand, she said sympathetically. Have you confronted her about it yet? Not directly, I replied, but I wasn't very nice to her last night. That's understandable, she nodded. But for now, I recommend keeping things as civil as possible. It's best not to let her know that you're aware of everything just yet. Let her carry on as usual until we serve her the divorce papers. Can you handle that? I'll try, I said, though I knew it would be tough. Good, Lisa said, jotting down some notes. Now, what are your goals for this divorce? I want as much as I can get, I said firmly. Especially custody of the kids, if they're even mine. You do know that mothers typically get custody, right? She pointed out. I've been the primary caregiver for the past 10 years, I countered. And in the video, she admitted that I'm a better parent than she is. She also chose to be with her lover instead of attending our daughter's birthday party. That should count for something, right? It definitely does, Lisa agreed. And we can use that to your advantage. She flipped through the financial documents I had brought, taking notes as she went. Your wife received a substantial amount from the sale of her company, she noted. And the monthly dividends she's receiving from the sale match your salary. This works in your favor. So, no spousal support? I asked hopefully. Very little, if any, Lisa confirmed. She's still young and capable of working. Plus, if we secure custody for you, we might even be able to get child support from her. What about the house? I asked. If we secure custody for you, you can remain in the house, and we'll request that she cover half of the mortgage, Lisa explained. However, if she's granted custody, you'd have to cover half of the mortgage and pay child support. The other option is to sell the house and split the proceeds. I nodded, trying to take it all in. What about our retirement accounts and savings? I inquired. We can simplify things by leaving retirement accounts out of the equation, Lisa explained. You both keep your 401(k)s, and everything else will be divided equally, which is typical in cases like this. Can I take legal action against Grant Jacobs? I asked, eager for some form of retribution. For alienation of affection? Not in this state, Lisa replied, but we'll include him in the divorce proceedings. There might be grounds to sue him for intentional infliction of emotional distress, but it's unlikely to go far. As for his sister Natalie, it's a similar situation. We can file, but it's not a strong case. I want to proceed with it anyway, I said, my anger getting the best of me. Understood, Lisa said, jotting down more notes. I believe we can have the paperwork filed by Friday. I'd like her to be served on Saturday, I requested. She'll be away with Grant for the weekend. Ah, a bit of shock and awe, Lisa smirked. We can arrange that, but there will be an additional fee for the process server to work on Saturday. That's fine, I said, determined to go through with it. We ended the meeting with a handshake, and Lisa gave me the usual lawyerly warning not to do anything rash. After writing her a retainer check, I left her office feeling more confident than I had in days. When I got home, I noticed Linda's car in the garage. It was only Wednesday, so I assumed she'd be at work. The engine was still warm, meaning she had driven recently. Inside, the smell of pot roast greeted me. Hey, sweetheart, Linda greeted me from the kitchen, a cheerful tone in her voice. Back early. Everything okay? Yeah, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. How are you feeling? Better than yesterday, she said. Getting things sorted. Hungry for dinner? I made pot roast, your favorite. I'll have a little, I said, sitting at the table. It smells great. Did you go into the office today? I asked, taking a sip of water. Just for a couple of hours, she replied. I'm prepping for the weekend. Did you talk to Sophie about her party? I inquired, keeping my voice calm. Yeah, she's not thrilled, but she'll cope, Linda said, her voice steady. And you're still going on that trip with Grant? I pressed. Yes, John, she said firmly. It's business. You know that. When do you plan to retire for real? I questioned, trying to mask the bitterness in my voice. I'm retired now, she insisted, but they still need me for a few things. I'm not sure how long it will last. Seems like you're working full-time again, I remarked sarcastically. Is that supposed to mean something? She asked defensively. With all the time you're giving them, you might as well be on the payroll, I said, pushing back my chair and heading toward my office. Linda followed, clearly not willing to let the conversation go. I'm making more money now than I did before, she said, trying to justify herself. I ignored her, putting my briefcase away and changing out of my work clothes. Dinner's ready, she called from the kitchen, her tone softening. I'll eat later, I muttered, locking myself in my office. Linda knocked a few times before she realized I wasn't coming out. I could hear her sigh as she walked away. The next day was much the same, except Linda tried to lure me to bed that night, wearing a nightgown that left little to the imagination. But knowing what she had been doing with Grant killed any attraction I once had for her. Sorry, Linda, I murmured, rubbing my temples. I've got a migraine. I'm going to crash in the office. She looked hurt, but I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. Friday morning came, and Linda called me to say she was off to her trip. Hope you're feeling better, John, she said over the phone. Maybe we can reconnect when I'm back on Monday. Yeah, I replied noncommittally. Have a safe trip. Linda paused for a moment. I love you, John. Sure, I muttered. Goodbye, Linda. After hanging up, I called Lisa to confirm that everything was in place for the weekend. Paperwork's being filed today, Lisa informed me. They'll be served tomorrow at 5:30 p.m., just like you requested. Thanks, Lisa, I said, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. I spent the rest of the day at home, preparing for Sophie's birthday party. At 5 p.m., the movers showed up to load some of Linda's belongings, which I had packed earlier. I made sure to include her wedding dress, which I had altered myself. After burning it down to ashes, I placed them in a paper bag with a note, my wedding ring, and our torn-up marriage certificate. I handed the package to one of the movers. Make sure this gets to her tomorrow at 5:30 p.m., I instructed. slipping him two $50 bills as a tip. "Will do, sir," the young man assured me. Later that night, I reheated some leftover pot roast and ate it in the living room while watching TV. I slept soundly in the master bedroom, knowing what was coming. The next day was Sophie's party, and Linda's parents arrived with the kids around noon. I had everything set up in the backyard, hoping the day would go smoothly. "You've been busy," Linda's mom remarked when she walked in. "I didn't have much choice," I replied with a forced smile. "I just hope everything goes well." "The kids will enjoy it," she reassured me. Sophie had mentioned that Linda wouldn't be at the party, and her mom confirmed it. "I can't believe she's missing her own daughter's birthday," her mom said, shaking her head in disbelief. "Is everything okay between you two?" she asked, giving me a concerned look. "No, it's not," I admitted. "I hate to break it to you, but you'll find out soon enough. I'm divorcing Linda." "What?" her dad exclaimed, clearly shocked. "Why? She's been having an affair with her boss for the last 12 years, I said bluntly. "In fact, that's where she is right now." "Oh my God," her mom gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "Are you sure?" "I've had my suspicions for a while," I explained, "but I hired a private investigator about a month ago, and he confirmed everything. I have photos, videos, the whole 9 yards. "You don't need to show us," her mom said quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the thought. Her dad, on the other hand, looked angry. "I'd like to see that report," he said through gritted teeth. "Sure," I said, gesturing for him to follow me into my home office. I handed him the written report, and he flipped through it, his face growing darker with each passing page. "That foolish woman," he muttered under his breath, handing the report back to me. "I'm sorry, John. She's my daughter, but this is hard to accept." "Now you understand my position," I replied, feeling a little bit of satisfaction that someone else finally saw Linda for who she was. "What's the plan with this Grant guy?" her dad asked. "I've taken legal action against him and his sister for causing emotional distress," I explained. He scoffed. "That's it? After 12 years of stealing your wife, he gets off easy." "I get it," I nodded. "But I have to think about the kids. Ending up in jail won't help anyone." "I suppose you're right," he conceded, though I could tell he wasn't happy about it. "Let me handle that jerk," he suggested. "You don't need to risk going to jail over him." I smiled at his protectiveness. "I'll leave that up to you," I agreed. We headed back outside to join the others for Sophie's party. When Sophie came down and saw the decorations, her face lit up with joy. "Thanks, Dad," she beamed, hugging me. "This is awesome. I wish Mom could see it." "Me too, sweetheart," I said, my heart aching a little. "But we'll take plenty of pictures for her." "Okay," she nodded, her smile returning. I fired up the grill and cooked burgers and hot dogs for everyone, hoping to keep the mood light. But at the back of my mind, I knew what was coming later that evening. At around 5 p.m., the doorbell rang. I excused myself from the party and went to answer it, knowing exactly what was about to happen. That Saturday evening felt surreal. Sophie's birthday party was in full swing, and everything seemed to be going smoothly on the surface. The backyard was buzzing with laughter and the excited chatter of kids as they played games, and I tried my best to stay engaged with the guests. But in the back of my mind, I knew the real show was about to begin soon, one that had nothing to do with cake or presents. At 5 p.m., I saw the process server's car pull up through the window, my stomach churning with anticipation. I quickly excused myself from the group and headed to the front door. My heart pounded as I opened it, knowing full well what was about to happen. Standing on my doorstep was a man in a light jacket, holding a couple of envelopes. He glanced up from his clipboard and nodded. "Good evening, sir. Is this the residence of Mr. Grant Jacobs?" "Yes, it is," I confirmed, my voice steady despite the tension building inside me. "And is Linda Walker present?" he asked, flipping through some paperwork. "No," I replied, my lips twitching slightly. "She's not here right now, but she will be soon." The process server nodded and handed me the envelopes. "You'll need to see that she gets these. I'll have a colleague deliver the second set to her at Mr. Jacobs' house later this evening. Both of you have been served." "Thank you," I said, taking the papers from him. He tipped his hat and headed back to his car. As he drove away, I stood there for a moment, looking down at the two envelopes in my hands. The time had finally come. I returned to the party, trying to focus on Sophie's special day. I couldn't let the chaos of my personal life ruin this for her. She was so happy, and I wanted her to hold on to that joy for as long as possible. When the cake was brought out and everyone gathered around to sing "Happy Birthday," I made sure to smile for the photos, even though it felt forced. After the kids had eaten their fill of cake and ice cream, Sophie came up to me, her face beaming. "Daddy, thank you so much for this party. I had the best time." I knelt down to her level, pulling her into a tight hug. "I'm so glad you enjoyed it, sweetheart. You deserve it." Her eyes twinkled as she looked up at me. "I wish Mom could have been here, but maybe she'll see the pictures and be happy too." A lump formed in my throat, and I fought to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, maybe she will." I felt a pang of guilt knowing that soon, Sophie would have to face the reality of what was happening between her mother and me. But today wasn't the day for that. Today was about her, and I wasn't going to let anything ruin it. Around 5:30 p.m., just as the last of Sophie's friends were leaving, I got a call from Lisa Hawkins. I stepped away from the backyard to answer it. "John, everything is in place," Lisa said, her voice calm and professional. "The process server just delivered the papers to Grant and Linda. They've been served." I exhaled a long breath, feeling a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. "Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate everything." "Of course. I'll be in touch if we need to go over anything else. But for now, take it easy. I know this is a lot to process." "Yeah," I said, my voice distant. "I'll try." As I hung up the phone, I looked over at the backyard where Sophie was playing with her little brother Aaron. For a moment, everything seemed so normal, just an ordinary family enjoying a sunny afternoon together. But I knew the storm was brewing. Soon enough, the facade would crumble. Just as the last of the guests had left, my phone buzzed again. This time it was from George, Linda's father. "We're at the house," George said. His voice sounded tense, almost hesitant. "How did it go?" I asked, already knowing the answer. There was a brief pause on the other end. "Not good. You better come over." I didn't need to be told twice. "I'll be there soon," I said, ending the call. I quickly told Sophie and Aaron that I had to step out for a bit and asked George's wife, Rhonda, to keep an eye on them while I was gone. She nodded sympathetically, clearly aware of what was going on, but didn't say anything more. As I drove to Grant's house, my mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. The process server had done his job. Linda and Grant had been served with the divorce papers and the restraining order. Now, the real fallout was about to begin. When I pulled up to the driveway of Grant's home, I noticed the same movers I had hired earlier, still parked outside. They were busy carrying boxes into the house. I stepped out of the car and made my way toward the front door, feeling the tension in the air as thick as fog. As I entered the house, I could immediately hear raised voices coming from the living room. Linda's voice was shrill, filled with panic and anger, while Grant's was low and steady, almost too calm for the situation. "You've got to be kidding me," Linda shrieked as I walked in. She was pacing back and forth, clutching the divorce papers in her hand. "A restraining order? Against me? What the hell, John?" Grant, sitting on the couch, glanced up at me when I entered the room, his face expressionless. If he was angry or upset, he wasn't showing it. His calm demeanor only served to infuriate Linda more. "John, what is this?" Linda demanded, waving the papers in my face. "Why are you doing this? Why now?" I stayed calm, not letting her anger provoke me. "Because, Linda, I've had enough," I said firmly. 12 years of lies, of betrayal. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Linda's face turned pale, and she opened her mouth to protest, but I didn't give her the chance. "I hired a private investigator," I continued, my voice steady but cold. "I know everything about you and Grant. The trips, the affair, all of it. So don't bother trying to deny it." Linda's eyes darted to Grant, and for the first time since I had walked in, he seemed uncomfortable. He shifted slightly in his seat, avoiding my gaze. "This isn't what you think," Linda stammered, her voice shaky. "Grant and we—" "Don't," I cut her off. "Don't insult my intelligence, Linda. I have the proof." I've seen the videos. Her face flushed with embarrassment, and she looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I never wanted to hurt you, John, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly, because you've done more than hurt me. You've torn apart our family. You've hurt our kids. Linda's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel any sympathy for her. Not anymore. Grant stood up then, crossing his arms over his chest. Look, John, he said, his voice smooth and measured. I understand you're upset, but let's be reasonable about this. There's no need for a restraining order. We can work this out like adults. I turned to face him, feeling my anger bubble to the surface. Work this out. I repeated, incredulous. You've been sleeping with my wife for over a decade, and you think we can just work this out? Are you out of your damn mind? Grant's calm facade finally cracked. His eyes narrowed, and he took a step forward. I didn't steal her from you, John, he said, his voice hard. If your marriage was so perfect, she wouldn't have come to me. That was it. That was the final straw. Before I could even think, I lunged at him, my fists clenched in rage. Grant wasn't expecting it, and I caught him off guard, landing a punch squarely on his jaw. He stumbled back, crashing into the coffee table as Linda screamed. John, stop! Linda shouted, trying to pull me away, but I wasn't done. I had years of pent-up anger and frustration, and now it was all coming out. Grant managed to get back on his feet, his face red with fury. He swung at me, but I ducked, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. You ruined my life. I snarled, my face inches from his. You took everything from me. John, please. Linda cried, grabbing my arm. Stop. This isn't helping. But I didn't care. All I could see was red. I threw another punch, hitting Grant in the stomach this time. He doubled over, gasping for air, but I didn't relent. I wanted him to feel the same pain he had caused me, the same betrayal, the same heartbreak. Just as I was about to hit him again, I felt strong arms pulling me back. George and another man, a mover, I think, had grabbed me, pulling me away from Grant. John, that's enough. George shouted, his voice booming. You're not helping anything by doing this. I struggled against their hold for a moment, but then the reality of the situation hit me. Beating Grant to a pulp wasn't going to solve anything. It wasn't going to undo what had been done. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, and let them pull me away from Grant. Grant stood there, clutching his stomach, his face twisted in pain. He glared at me, but there was fear in his eyes now, a fear that hadn't been there before. This isn't over, he spat, wiping blood from his lip. Yes, it is, I said, my voice low and dangerous. It's over for you, Grant. You've been served with divorce papers and a restraining order. You're out of my life for good. I turned to Linda, who was standing off to the side, her face pale and tear-streaked. And as for you, I said coldly, you can have him. I don't care anymore. Linda's eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to say something, but I held up my hand, cutting her off. I'll be taking full custody of the kids, I said. You can see them on weekends, if they even want to see you. But as far as I'm concerned, we're done. You can live your life with Grant, or whoever else you decide to screw next. I could see the devastation in her eyes, but I didn't care. Not anymore. This was the end for us, and there was no turning back. I turned on my heel and walked out of the house, not looking back. George followed me out, catching up to me as I reached my car. John, he said quietly, I know this is hard, but beating the crap out of him isn't going to fix things. I know, I muttered, rubbing my sore knuckles, but it sure felt good. George sighed, shaking his head. You're better than this, son. Am I? I asked, feeling the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me. Yes, he said firmly. You are. You're a good man, John. Don't let them drag you down to their level. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. Thanks, George. Anytime, he said, patting my shoulder. Now go home. Be with your kids. They need you. I climbed into my car, my hands still trembling from the adrenaline, and drove home in silence. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat there for a moment, staring at the house. This was my life now, just me and the kids. Everything else was gone. I stepped inside and was immediately greeted by Sophie and Aaron, both of them running up to me with wide eyes. "Dad, are you okay?" Sophie asked, her voice filled with concern. We heard yelling. "I'm fine," I assured her, kneeling down to hug her. "Everything's going to be okay." "Did you fight with Mom?" Aaron asked, his voice small. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I did. But it's over now." Sophie's face scrunched up in confusion. "What do you mean?" I sighed, knowing it was time to tell them the truth. "Your mom and we're not going to be together anymore. We're getting a divorce." The words hung in the air, heavy and painful. Sophie's eyes welled up with tears, and Aaron looked at me, his face pale. "But why?" Sophie whispered. "I thought you loved each other." "We did," I said softly. "But sometimes love isn't enough." Sophie burst into tears, throwing herself into my arms. I held her tightly, my heart breaking for her. Aaron stood there silently, his face expressionless, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. "It's going to be okay," I whispered to them both. "We're going to be okay." But as I sat there, holding my children close, I couldn't help but wonder if I was lying to them. Was anything really going to be okay after this? The days following Sophie's birthday party and the confrontation at Grant's house were a blur. After that fight, the anger that had once consumed me started to cool, but the pain and emptiness remained. I spent most of my time trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for Sophie and Aaron, focusing on their routines and keeping things as stable as possible. But the truth was, the ground beneath our feet had shifted, and there was no going back. Lisa, my lawyer, kept me updated on the legal proceedings. Linda had formally accepted the divorce papers, and the restraining order was in full effect. The process was moving faster than I expected, and it seemed like we were headed toward a clean break. Grant, on the other hand, had remained disturbingly quiet since our fight, and that worried me. Part of me expected him to retaliate, but for now, there had been no further contact. The kids were handling things as well as could be expected. Sophie was heartbroken, of course. She missed her mother, and though she didn't say it, I knew she was struggling to understand why everything had fallen apart. Aaron, being more introverted, kept his emotions to himself, but I caught him staring off into space sometimes, lost in thought. I wanted to comfort them both, but I was still processing my own pain, and it was hard to give them the answers they deserved. A week after the birthday party, Linda's father, George, called me. He sounded tired, more defeated than I'd ever heard him. "John," he began hesitantly, "I'm really sorry to bother you, but there's something you need to know." "What is it, George?" I asked, sensing something serious. "It's Linda," he said, sighing heavily. "She's not handling this well. Rhonda and I are doing what we can, but we found her passed out yesterday. She had taken some pills, sleeping pills, and mixed them with alcohol." I froze, the weight of his words hitting me like a freight train. "Is she okay?" "She's fine physically," George assured me, "but it was close. We got her to the hospital in time, and the doctors say she'll be okay. But they're recommending she stay under observation for a while, maybe longer. We're trying to get her the help she needs." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and anger, a part of me still cared for Linda. Hearing that she had sunk to such a low filled me with a deep sadness. I knew she was struggling, but I hadn't realized just how bad it had gotten. "I'm sorry, George," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know it was this bad." "She's been a mess since the divorce papers came through," George explained. "She's not just upset about you and the kids. I think she's grappling with what she's done. She's in a really dark place right now." I didn't know what to say. The Linda I had known for so many years, the woman I had once loved deeply, had fallen apart. And while I had every reason to hate her, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. "If there's anything I can do to help," I started, but George cut me off. "Just take care of the kids, John. That's the best thing you can do right now. Rhonda and I will handle Linda. She's not in a place where she can be a mother right now, and honestly, I don't know if she ever will be again. But you, You've always been a good father. Just keep being that for Sophie and Aaron. I will, I promised. And George. I'm really sorry. I know you are, son, he said softly. Take care of yourself, too. After hanging up, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, the reality of the situation sinking in. I had been so focused on my own hurt that I hadn't considered what this was doing to Linda. She had made her choices, and she was paying for them now in ways I hadn't anticipated. But as much as I sympathized with her, I couldn't forget the damage she had done. Not just to me, but to our children. As I mulled over George's words, the doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I walked to the door cautiously. When I opened it, standing on the porch was a woman I hadn't seen in years. "Nikki?" I asked, stunned. "Hey, John," she said, offering a small smile. Surprise. Nikki had been an old friend from college. We had dated briefly back in the day, but had lost touch over the years. Seeing her now, out of the blue, felt like a ghost from the past had resurfaced. "What are you doing here?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around her sudden appearance. "I was in town for work," she explained, "and I heard about what happened with Linda. I figured I'd stop by and see how you were doing." I wasn't sure how to feel about her showing up unannounced, but there was something comforting about seeing a familiar face from a simpler time. "Come on in," I said, stepping aside to let her in. We sat in the living room, and as we talked, the years seemed to melt away. Nikki had always been easy to talk to, and before long, we were reminiscing about old times, laughing about the antics we used to get up to in college. For a little while, it felt like a reprieve from the heavy reality of my life. "So, how are you really holding up?" Nikki asked after a while, her tone turning more serious. I sighed, leaning back on the couch. "It's been rough," I admitted. "The divorce, the kids, finding out about Linda's affair. It's all been a lot to process." "I can't imagine," she said softly. "I'm sorry you're going through this, John." "Thanks," I said, giving her a weak smile. "It helps just to talk about it with someone who's not involved in all of it." She nodded, her expression understanding. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here. I know we haven't seen each other in years, but I've always considered you a friend." "I appreciate that," I said sincerely. We spent the rest of the evening catching up, and by the time Nikki left, I felt a little lighter. For the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things might eventually be okay. As the weeks passed, life began to settle into a new routine. The divorce proceedings continued, and it was clear that Linda wasn't going to contest anything. She had signed the papers, and it seemed like she was resigned to the fact that our marriage was truly over. I knew she was still staying with her parents, but beyond that, I didn't hear much about her. George and Rhonda were careful to shield me from most of the details, and I appreciated that. They were good people, and despite everything that had happened, I didn't want them to suffer because of Linda's mistakes. Grant, on the other hand, had finally made his move. A few weeks after our confrontation, I received a letter from his lawyer, threatening to sue me for assault and emotional distress. It was laughable, really, considering everything he had put me through. Lisa assured me that there was no merit to his case, and we could easily defend against it. Still, it was another headache I didn't need. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat down with a glass of whiskey, reflecting on how much had changed. I was a different person now, hardened by betrayal and loss. But I wasn't broken. If anything, I had become stronger. My kids were my anchor, and every day, I focused on being the best father I could be. They needed me now more than ever, and I wasn't going to let them down. Nikki and I stayed in touch, exchanging messages and phone calls every now and then. There was a warmth between us that had never fully gone away, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was potential for something more. But I wasn't ready to dive into another relationship, not after everything that had happened with Linda. For now, I was content with the way things were, a tentative friendship that brought a bit of light into my life. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. I had full custody of Sophie and Aaron, with Linda granted visitation rights, though she had yet to exercise them. She was still in treatment, and from what George had told me, it would be a while before she was stable enough to see the kids. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Part of me was relieved, knowing that the kids were better off without her influence right now. But another part of me felt sad for them. They deserved a mother who could be there for them, and Linda just wasn't that person anymore. On the day the divorce was finalized, I sat down with Sophie and Aaron to explain everything to them. They had known for a while that things were changing, but now it was official. "Does this mean Mom isn't coming back?" Sophie asked quietly, her eyes downcast. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "Yes, sweetheart. It means that Mom and I aren't going to be together anymore." Sophie sniffled, wiping at her eyes. "But she still loves us, right?" "Of course she does," I said, pulling her into a hug. "She loves you both very much. She's just going through some things right now. But that doesn't change how she feels about you." Aaron, who had been quiet through most of the conversation, finally spoke up. "Are we going to be okay, Dad?" I looked at him, my heart aching for the weight he was carrying at such a young age. "Yes," I said firmly. "We're going to be okay. We have each other, and that's what matters." He nodded, though I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. I knew it would take time for them to fully process everything, but I was determined to be there for them every step of the way. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat on the back porch, watching the stars. The finality of the divorce hit me hard. 12 years of marriage, gone in the blink of an eye. I thought back to the day I had proposed to Linda, the day we said our vows. We had been so full of hope, so sure that we would spend the rest of our lives together. But life had other plans. As I sat there, I thought about the future. It was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had survived the worst, and I had come out stronger on the other side. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it, one step at a time. 6 months after the divorce, I took Sophie and Aaron on a Mediterranean cruise. It was something I had promised them after everything we had been through, and I was determined to give them the experience of a lifetime. We visited beautiful cities, swam in crystal-clear waters, and made memories that I knew would last a lifetime. On the second night of the cruise, as we were sitting on the deck watching the sunset, Sophie leaned over and rested her head on my shoulder. "I love you, Dad," she said softly. "I love you too, sweetheart," I replied, wrapping my arm around her. Aaron, who was sitting on my other side, looked up at me and smiled. "We're lucky to have you." I felt my heart swell with emotion. "No," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm the lucky one." As I sat there with my kids, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that life, despite all its challenges, was still full of beauty. And as long as I had my children by my side, I knew I could face whatever came next. The end of my marriage wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, healing, and the promise of brighter days ahead.